And I am now recording.
I'll
Oops.
share it on my
Yeah.
socials so everybody can join in.
Yeah. Same with mine too. Although I haven't had a chance to really Sultans and sneakers. Let me make sure it's muted on my end. I don't like to. Great. Share. Share now. Public.
Well, I'm set up at my end.
You good? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Internet's Facebook fam, welcome to another live stream episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, Mahin Islam, and on today's show, we have a long-awaited guest, someone who probably should have been out a lot earlier, and as usual, I am delayed in everything I do. But Maarten van Elst from Muslim Fit, I'm actually upset that my boy Ziad got you on his show first. It was like, oh man, I waited too long, and Martin
Yeah.
is now going on with other Chicago guys. Um, we did an Instagram story on its IG live show, like middle of like 2 weeks ago, I think now, right? Not
Yeah.
last week, the week
Somewhat.
before.
No.
I,
Yeah.
I, I was still employed then,
You still a job.
still at a job, right? And
So, guys, Mahin also accepts donations right now.
you know what? I'm all right. I'm good for now. I just can't be splurging on dumb. Like yesterday, these Jordans came out, and I had to hold off because
Yeah.
like $200 was I just wasn't gonna blow $200. But like, yeah, we're about to collect that unemployment check. You know,
So, but how because you had that, how was it called in the US?
furlough.
Uh, Furlough, yeah. So,
Yeah,
do you get paid or not?
we do. So
Okay.
what happens is that like you apply for unemployment benefit, but a furlough is different than a layoff because with a furlough, what happens is you get to keep your health benefits, which is really critical, right? So if someone gets
Yeah.
sick, their health insurance is still there, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
the big thing in the U.S. is that we like in the Netherlands, you guys have universal health care. Does everyone have health care in the Netherlands?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
it's obligated.
Yeah, we don't have that here because people got to make that cheddar. You know what I'm saying? Like, can't be giving out free health care to
Yeah.
people who don't like deserve it, right? Only if you contribute to the economy, or only if you're working for one
Yeah.
of these like corporate machines, or you have
Yeah.
or you have a business that you can like pay enough money to I guess Obamacare was an option. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
there
So
or not.
basically, if you cannot afford it, you're not contributing enough.
Correct, and then
Yeah.
you deserve to die. In pure Darwinian fashion. So, anyways, this conversation I think is interesting. Like, people. I think every time people have you on their show, it's always like, "Hey, man, what should I be eating?" We talk about like
Yeah.
what does fitness mean, but I want to talk about like tell me about tell me about yourself. Introduce yourself to the listeners. Where are you from? I know you're from Rotterdam, which is a
Yeah.
city in Amsterdam. That's all I know. But like that's
Whoa. Bro, that's that's ooh. It's getting hot. I think we just lost some viewers. I'm sorry.
Okay. All
No,
right.
no.
So
Basically, Rotterdam and Amsterdam have the big rivalry.
okay.
It's like I don't know what's the biggest. What's the Chicago big NBA opponent?
It depends. Like so, it used to be Detroit. I would say the city Chicago has a rivalry with is like St. Louis.
Okay, yeah.
Say
Well, basically, we the biggest football rivalry
yeah,
in our country is
right.
basically between Ajax from Amsterdam and Feyenoord from Rotterdam.
Yeah, I got.
So
Feyenoord. Yeah, I've heard of them.
yeah,
They'll go into the Champions League every now and then, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Although Ajax is a bit better last season, but We're not going to talk about football.
Oh, we're not. But like,
No.
what is it about? Like, so how many generations has you're Dutch, of course, right?
Yeah.
Um, how far back has your family been there? Like, what like is the Dutch is being Dutch like an ethnicity?
Yeah. 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 Well, white people don't really care that much about their heritage or
Okay.
family. Like, um, you have your uncles and your nieces aren't even family anymore, almost.
Oh, really? Okay.
Um, so I don't really know a lot about how far away back my family roots go, but I do know that my grandparents and great grandparents all lived in the Netherlands. My mother's heritage goes to much a bit more to the north.
Hmm.
So the top, that Groningen and Friesland, it's the top of the Netherlands, and I like to believe that my gingerest beard is from the Vikings, because there was a short period in time that the Vikings were in the north of the Netherlands.
Hmm.
It's a far stretch, but um, yeah, basically, I don't have any foreign roots, so I think I can call myself 100% Dutch.
Yeah.
And my children will be the first mixed race in our family,
Okay. And
inshallah.
you got that pure blood so far.
Yeah.
And if I recall, the Dutch weren't they were an empire at one point, right? They were
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of the
We were the biggest Muslim country in the world at one
what?
point.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, because we had Indonesia, and Indonesia had the highest Muslim population
Oh,
of all the
okay.
Muslim countries. So at a moment in time, we were the biggest Muslim country in the world
So,
by colonization,
yes,
unfortunately.
so Indonesia was never under the Ottomans or under any kind of Islamic caliphate or anything like that, right? It was always
No, no, no. It was always like most Asia. It wasn't really. It was not officially part of the Ottoman Empire, but they did have like.
mm,
I don't know. They felt connected with it, because I'm not a historian. So,
yeah,
but I remember that a friend of mine who is an historian,
yeah.
he told about an instance that the Dutch monarch, our queen, wanted to implement, like, whatever khutbah, they always praised the Ottoman Sultan
Mm,
in the beginning,
yeah.
and the our ministry wanted that to change that. In every khutbah, before they started, they praised the Dutch queen instead of the caliph.
Mm, okay.
And the ambassador in the time protested, like, for this going to get riots, and they didn't listen, and then it ended up in a lot of upheaval and um, critique from the Muslim community. So, yeah, Indonesia wasn't part of the Ottoman Empire, but it did have some connection with it, of course.
Right. Now, how is it so in America you have like various streams of like nat like what it means to be American is like differs on who you talk to, right? You've got you're more right wing conservative folks, people who are now affiliated with Trump. They're seen as patriots, and that's because they believe we believe in the Constitution and we believe in America and the military, and that's their idea of America. And then you have other people who are like you're more like your liberals who would be like freedom of speech, like being able to dissent. Those are issues. By the way, there's an echo in you. Is your phone on? By the
Sorry?
way, is your phone on? The audio on your phone on? I would
No.
mute it. I can hear something coming through,
No, that's strange.
like an echo.
Oh, maybe I put my
Yeah,
gain down a bit. Is it
yeah.
gone now?
There was an echo going across. It's good now. I don't think I hear it right now. It's fine. It's fine now. But like there's an echo. Anyways, so there's these various strands of what it means to be American. To you, what does it mean to be Dutch? Is there a certain identity with it?
Um, I think the funny thing is that the Dutch don't actually have like a. They're not very naturalistic. Well, it's difficult because now with the growing, the nationalism, the populism is growing in our country, like in the most of European countries,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, so of course we have a lot of culture, but I think what is most typical for Dutch people is that we're really sober, really down to earth, and we're really against. Um, I think we pride ourselves in being really, really normal.
Okay.
um, so, for example, most Dutch people are quite allergic to, for example, the exaggerated, enthusiastic um, American marketing and stuff. Like we always, you always see the comedians when they start, is everybody from Washington, yay! If you
Yeah.
do that in the Netherlands, we just watch. Okay, just act normal. We have a
Yeah.
saying: if you act normal, you already act crazy enough. So I
Mm.
think if you really what's typically Dutch is we're quite sober and down to the ground and
Okay.
quite straight up and we called it straight up, but it's basically we can be quite rude and straightforward.
I see. Do you think that the Netherlands as a country is because like we hear about that like that, for example, religion in Europe is more or less dead, right? As an institution. Like
Yeah,
Europe was at one point like the bastion of Christendom, right?
yeah,
Like, and now it seems like the only thing like Christian about Europe seems to be that like the monuments that are still there, the old cathedrals, people keep for like sentiment of like their history, their tradition, but people aren't really like theologically inclined to anything at this point. Would you say that's similar about the Netherlands? Is that like the people there are more or less like irreligious now? Like, do you think that's the trend?
um by the way, Europe is the same as like I don't know it's or America, but you cannot really see Europe as one identity.
Hmm.
It's really diverse because um, if you speak of religion, for example, in the Netherlands, religion is very, very private.
Okay.
Um, if you go on and how I know that is because I once went to the UK to Manchester to go with the IARA team to do street dawa. There's a lot of street tents and stuff, and here in the Netherlands, if you ask somebody what if he or she believes in God, it's like a really privacy invading question. It's really, really
Mm.
um, people get shocked by it. And I remember that I was shocked that when I went to the UK and I just straight up asked like a businessman in a suit, "Do you believe in God?" That he was perfectly fine with discussing it. So um, I think there are differences in Europe how we experience religion.
Mm.
I was brought up in a small village, and they call it the Bible Belt. Well, not really the Bible Belt, but it was a really Christian village.
Okay.
So um, yeah, and now I live in the city in Rotterdam, and I think in the cities, religion is much more um, pushed back in society, and like there's some bit of a shame because even the Christians don't like to openly confess that they're practicing Christians, for example. So there's a bit of a shame culture around religion here in the Netherlands. Although, like if you look at Dutch culture, you can really see two different cultures in the Dutch. We have the um, I don't know how to say it in English, but basically we have the big city, the urban environments, and
Mm.
we have the more
Yeah.
rural,
The country.
yeah, the countryside. The
Yeah.
countryside can be still really, 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 really religious, and
Okay.
also have a strong religious identity. So um, we call it the Black Sox communities, that the really strict Protestants, and so we do have religion in our society. I think in the more urban and the more yeah the hip environments, religion is really private and a bit shameful even. And in the more rural countryside, it's much more prevalent and still really really active. We still have a really big active Christian community in our country.
I see. Now, do you think would you say there's not really a correlation though between being Dutch and being and having a Christian background? Like, people equate
Yeah, yeah.
like
No,
there
well,
is
currently they really
are
our right wing politicians always pride themselves about our Christian Judaic culture.
mm,
So although religion is a bit looked down upon, our Christian heritage, our Christian culture is still appreciated.
right. And I think that's kind of a reaction to like what the issue of Islam, honestly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
and
there's no,
immigration. Yeah,
because if you add that barrier, if you add this layer of your identity, even if you're not practicing, but like being Christian, whatever that means to your identity, it's then at that point, it's like if you were to practice another religion, then you almost become a traitor to your cause, a
yeah.
traitor to your heritage, a traitor to your ancestors, right? Was that now? What was your own? How was your family background as far as religion went? Like growing up, were your? I assume you come from a Christian family. Were your parents religious? Like, were your grandparents religious? What was the impact of religion in your family growing up?
Well, I grew up in a Christian village, and I went to a Christian primary school. So I've been taught Christianity from school.
Mm-hmm.
My family weren't never really religious. My father has a background. He was a biology teacher. So he also studied evolution theory. So, and I think he has some. I don't know. I think he has some bad memories or experiences with Christianity in his past. I don't really, never really spoke about it, but I somehow get the feeling he had.
Mm-hmm.
Same for my mother. She was never really Christian. So I never had any religion from her house. But my mother is more the spiritual side. So Buddhism,
Yeah.
spirituality, what most middle-aged white women go
Yeah.
to nowadays.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was watching the Last Dance documentary, the Chicago Bulls,
Yeah,
documentary that's airing right. That's like the big sports news in the US right now because there's no sports. So they had this documentary going about the 90 Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, and Phil Jackson was in that Zen Buddhism stuff. So yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting that like a lot of that spirituality stuff, like that I've noticed that the spirituality around that whole issue of spirituality and spiritual practices, whether it's like Kabbalah or like Buddhism or Sufism, is very much attractive to people of like European descent for some reason. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. Yeah, I think it's because in our fitra we have the the appeal of spirituality and religion, and I think the whole spirituality is basically um, having a God without rules, basically.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a because that's maybe good thing to know about the Netherlands is like just before we had like 50, 60 years ago we had it was called the verzuiling. Verzuiling is, I don't know how to translate. It's called a zuil as a pillar, and we had different denominations of Christianity, so Protestantism, Catholics, um, and our whole country, our society was grouped in all those different Christian groups. So yet still today you have the Catholic TV, Catholic radio. Now they're all more secularized, and but you still see the remnants of it. And it was really strict, and it was a real segregation in society. So I think that's part of why in the Netherlands we have such a bad uh, stance towards religion, because we have some bad experiences with sectarism. Basically, the whole society was basically, the whole Sufi Salafi wars.
yeah.
We basically had that in the entire country.
Okay.
So I think that plays a big part. And now people are a little bit allergic about
Hmm.
when religion starts to implement
Yeah.
rules, and
As
especially
far
when
as
those
yeah,
go into society.
what people call organized religion, right? I was
Yeah,
I remember I was I was talking to a friend the other day who was talking about another friend who was like, yeah, this person, like, there's a person like I know of that's exploring like Christianity, right? Um, but that person is reading the God and likes the stuff about Jesus when the Jesus does like good acts and all that kind of stuff and heals people, but then doesn't like Paul. I'm like, why doesn't they don't like Paul? Paul has too many rules.
Yeah.
Paul says do this and do that. I'm like, what's wrong with rules, right? And then it's like this whole like, yeah, people have this like people based upon their upbringing or their worldview have an understanding of like what rules mean. Like, oh, this means now the religion is trying to impose something in my life, so
Yeah.
to speak, right? It's trying to take away my freedom. It's trying to do this, so it's almost like people have a preconceived notion of what religion's got to be. And the spirituality sense is, like you said, there's really no I mean, it's really, you don't have to do much, right?
You can just do what you like.
Yeah,
It's yeah.
spirituality as by itself is just like a very like, you don't have to reform yourself. You kind of, and then I wonder how many people, and I'm sure this ties into like fitness as well, which we can get into later, like the same mindset of like how many clients you get that like want to look like you, but then like they assume there's a pill or something or like a hack, like a diet. It's
Yeah.
probably, it's kind of like similar in that way. Like they're like, oh, if I go to the spiritual guru, this will give me that peace of mind or that inner peace, um without realizing that maybe they need to put in the work, right? Because like I think Muslims, we would say that like, all right, well, you have a very this aspect of being content at the end of the day is something from the divine, right?
Yeah.
God can grant that peace to anybody, right? He doesn't necessarily have to be Muslim, but I think when you understand the source, it helps you navigate it better. Whereas if you just don't know, or if you just like want to ignore it, like yeah, how you meet people of other faiths, they're like they hold on to their faith because it's identity thing, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then they like are interested in like maybe it's not like Sufism, for example, right? That concept. Um, but then not real, and then they're like, all right, we read these books or we do a litany or whatever, but like I'm like, yeah, but like a lot of it is like training yourself, like fasting, prayer, like almost putting your own soul in check, right? That's how you get the fruits of it, right? Like through the rules, not
Yeah.
like through some like guru or like reading a book or some kind of like meditative practice. Because like what happens is that people want to like do a meditative practice, but then they want to hit the club tonight. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And you're gonna go take some chick home, and then so it's like it's gonna be a lot of and that's why I'm really fascinated. I'm really interested in. I don't know if you guys have seen this show Rami.
No, we don't have it here in the Netherlands.
Well, it's on Hulu. So season 2's coming out. I saw the trailer
Okay.
for it, and
Yeah.
then Rami's a polarizing figure amongst American Muslims, right? Um, you know what I'm saying? But like it looks like in season 2 he's
Yeah.
taking on like a spiritual path, like almost like a Sufi tariqa in a way. That's the impression I like he has
Okay.
a
Yeah.
shake, but then he has this challenge of like dealing with like sleeping around and like doing drugs and drink and like all that kind. I don't think he was drinking much in season 1. I don't think that was an issue for him, but like definitely girls and messing around was a
Do
big
you think
problem
he's
for him.
going to get more flack? Because I know he got a lot of critique and a lot of hate. Do you think he's going to get more hate when he's going to act out a more spiritual, religious part? Because then, like, what I've got from it, it was like just playing a guy who doesn't really practice. He wanted to be a bit more on the deen, but didn't really work out. And that
Yeah.
was the whole critique that it was a bit too much of the fitna. You didn't have to go into so much detail, basically.
Yeah.
um, but don't you think that he's going to get more flack if he is going to uh, play a more religious person and still going into the sin?
Well,
Because then you start touching the identity part.
I think he's trying to like show the progress, right, of a person, right? Um, so he's getting the thing is he's gonna get the flack no matter what,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's what you gotta come to grips with it, right? You're gonna like at some point you have to. I don't know if you deal with this as much in your field of work. Mad Mamluks, we deal with it. Even Sultans and Stinkers, I tell people, listen, this is not a show for Muslims, right? So for example, if someone were to cuss on the show, I wouldn't cut it out. I would just label the show explicit, dirty, like, not clean language, etc. Right?
Yeah,
But even in spite of that, you're like, because Rami obviously isn't just for Muslims. The show,
yeah,
it's for a mainstream audience. Like I had a coworker of mine who was telling me he like binged on it. He said he was like it was hilarious, right? And I feel like Muslims sometimes we have this like tendency to like always, everything has to be, and and everyone's got to have an opinion on, oh, because you're representing the community. I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, I don't know if Rami's trying to represent the community unless he said something, right?
yeah,
Mad Mamluks, we don't represent like all the Muslims. I don't think we ever claim to. People want to put us in that box. They're like, oh, you are the platform the community goes to. I'm like, yeah, but we've only become the platform because people made us the platform. You understand what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
So I think that's kind of where like the community wants to like be judge, jury, executioner all at once, and you can't make everybody happy,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Well, we're so afraid because like the general media is already working against us basically. So we get even more scared when Muslims go and maybe contribute even more to the negative aspect. So I understand the feeling, and I must say, like, even also in the Netherlands we had like a Muslim TV program. It's called the New Moon, and they literally had like on their third presenter. The new one is really good, but the first and second one, they were like basically anti-Islam. It was really cringy to. It was. I found it quite hurtful for our image, and
yeah,
so I understand the feeling. I don't think like that the sitcom is really going to hurt Islam so
yeah,
much.
right. I mean, the thing of it is, it seems like no matter. So before if I think about like, we'll go on a little tangent here, right quick. But it's like before the shows that we had, there was a show called Little Mosque on a Prairie. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
There was also one from the UK, right?
The one, which one?
With
Like,
the uncle in it. Basically, there's a Pakistani or Desi Muslim guy. I saw
okay,
some clips on YouTube. It was quite funny.
I actually haven't seen that. There's Man Like Mobeen, which is based out of the UK. It's on Netflix.
No, it was really. I know that, but this one is quite old. Like it looked old, like 10 years back, or so 20 years back.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, it seems like so Rami isn't, and some of those older shows, like All American Muslim was a one season show, but that's like more like a documentary. That wasn't really a actual like a sitcom or like a kind of like drama, right?
Yeah,
Rami, I think, is the first of its kind. It's very unique. It's not like it's showing you, but it's showing you. It's like some of it's exaggerated, right? It is showing people's spiritual struggles, but at the same time, like, I'll tell people that, like, hey, I've got like childhood friends that I grew up with that like got girls pregnant, right?
yeah,
In high school, like, you know what I'm saying? Not in like high, but like, outside of marriage, obviously. Okay, that's because if it's within marriage and like nobody cares,
yeah. No
it's like
problem.
no problem.
Mashallah.
Um, but I've had child, like, or they would like say really blasphemous things without even thinking twice. I mean, that's the reality. Listen, when our parents came from like these other countries, like these like less well-off countries to the United States for economic, prowess, to like better themselves, it's the collateral damage that happens, right? Um, and so Rami,
Yeah,
I think, is trying to show some of that, and there's some exaggeration. People see it as exaggeration, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but some of that stuff does go down. Like it's not
yeah,
like I mean, I think most people would say like the whole scene in season one when you go to Taraweeh and you take like a Muslim housewife home having an affair with her. That's probably a little extreme, but
yeah,
like it's still but there are Muslim housewives having affairs, right?
yeah.
Wearing hijab.
True.
That's
Yeah,
definitely like not out of the question. The context of doing it in Ramadan, like after like skipping Taraweeh to do it, is another thing. But like,
yeah,
I mean, people are so hung up on those little details, I think they're missing the point. And so there's this. I mean, listen, if you don't like the show, don't watch the show. People are saying like, why are you promoting sin? Like, I'll talk about the show openly. Like, listen, I enjoy the show. I think it's entertaining. Okay. I also am not hung up on this fact that like, oh, he's most like, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, I see people like I'll watch movies or I'll watch TV that has similar kind of content in it, right?
Yeah.
And okay, if watching Rami is a problem, then watching all that stuff's a problem, and it might be. It actually might be. So obviously, there's a lot of people are more religiously inclined brothers and sisters will probably not watch some of that stuff in general, right? Because of what it shows, and I get it,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that like. And honestly, if I were to sometimes think about creating my ideal individual, maybe I wouldn't be wasting my time watching TV or movies like that. You understand what I'm saying? Just to be real, but I am, and that's just the reality. And so, like, part of what we have to navigate here is we're trying to be real. We don't want to be fake. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Nabil Aziz talked about this on our show with him when we did the podcast back in Dubai. Is like sometimes Muslims are so like trying to be perceived as these like super religious, like our image. I'm
Yeah.
like, and he's like, at the end of the day, like, why don't you just worry about like your connection with Allah or your connection with God?
Yeah.
The image will take care of
And,
itself.
and the funny thing is, if we start showing like the perfect Muslim on TV, and all the white people see it, they're like, "That's not like my colleague."
Right,
So
exactly,
you
yeah,
also, we always so worried that we're going to picture ourselves in a bad way, but I think if we do the opposite, um, I think most people will see through it
yeah,
at the same time, because everybody knows Muslims, everybody probably knows a few good ones, probably also know quite a few bad ones.
yeah,
So I agree with you. We shouldn't be that fearful of our image,
yeah. I mean,
because especially with all the terrorists doing, I don't think a sitcom is really going to make it any worse.
that kind of program won't, right? It seems like, someone could argue that a movie like Four Lions does more to create stereotypes than, even though it's a comedy,
Yeah,
right? It's satire, it's
yeah,
comedy, than Rami. Like like, what I've realized is like a lot of this stuff, a lot of these narratives that are being created, it's all spin. It's all like, how do you want to like? There's something going down. How do we want to like use words and like present these like scenarios that actually are spin? Like,
yeah,
you understand what I'm saying? It's you see it within like when Muslims critique other Muslims upon their religious viewpoints, like how they add their own commentary. So like, let's say for example, I was gonna critique one of your like, let's say you have a kettlebell workout or something, right? And I was gonna
yeah,
like, critique, and I'm like, nah, man, we got to go barbell only powerlifting, and this guy wants to do kettlebells only or something, and I'm like critiquing your kettlebell workout, and I'm like throwing in random commentary, kind of almost allowing, making the judge interpretation for my reader before actually allowing him to actually like consume your content on his own terms. You understand what I'm saying?
yeah, 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 yeah,
So so
yeah.
so the
Yeah,
community is just is notorious for doing that no matter what. And it's similar. They're like, Rami is promoting porn. And I'm like,
yeah.
how? Like no, he, what people, and he was like, okay, yes, he acknowledges that he watches porn in season 1, but it's seen as a shortcoming, not as something like praiseworthy. You understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
It
Like,
was the same with the Masih
yeah,
Netflix series. It
right.
was so overly hyped, and I watched it. And first, I was like, "Okay, is this really? Why are you guys stressing so much?" And I
Right.
always felt a little bit guilty that I really, really liked the show. I found it to be really good,
Yeah.
but it's so over dramatized about. Uh, um, yeah, somehow I think like, especially now, at least. Yeah, what I said, down to earth guys, I don't really think we're going to be led astray by such obvious, uh, yeah,
Right.
shows. It's fake. Everybody knows it. It's not
Yeah.
like a reality series or news. Yeah,
Right, exactly. So, anyways, back to yourself and your own family growing up. So, if I could take it, you understood Chris. you went to a Christian school, so you understood the tenets of Christianity, but
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you never really were practicing as a Christian. You weren't, it wasn't like
No,
something
no,
you went,
I never saw myself as a Christian.
okay. The Holy Spirit never
But
got you, basically. The Holy Spirit did not
no,
get you.
no, no,
So,
no, no. Unfortunately,
you
no.
know, it's like that is always like one of the things that when Christians talk about, like people who left Christianity, they're like, well, the Holy Spirit never really got them. Now, for you, it's pretty
But
evident you
it's
never
the same
came.
with Muslims, right? If we see somebody leave Islam, but was he really Muslim though? You know.
Well, in our case, it's actually true.
Yeah.
um, or you find out that there's some from some sect that wasn't even Muslim in
Yeah,
the first place,
yeah,
right?
true.
Dude,
Yeah,
like that dude Nabil Qureshi. You know what I'm saying?
was he?
So he
Yeah.
no, yeah, he was Qadiani or Ahmadi, whatever you want to call it, right?
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah,
so Christians will bring him up like, oh, he was Muslim. Like, no, he wasn't. He actually he
yeah.
actually he actually upgraded. He became a better believer by becoming a Christian.
Yeah.
Right? He elevated his rank, so to speak. But anyways, so when did you first get interested in religion? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. Well, as a person, I was always really interested in ethics, morality, and I really struggle with unfairness. So um, basically, my whole road to I never had like a spiritual search. It was always a quest of morality and the perfect society. So, like I said, I grew up in a small farmer village, really safe, really protected. You didn't have to lock your bike when you went to the store and those kinds of stuff. And then when I went to high school, I went to because our village didn't have a high school. We had to go to the big city, and all of a sudden I was confronted with poverty, gangster culture, drugs. Basically, I saw a lot of problems. That was the first time I really became conscious of problems in society, and then on one side, people that really annoyed me because I felt they had a bit bad influence. So, because that's one thing that I really value of having at least a Christian upbringing, in the sense that I lived in a very Christian environment, is that you get a really good sense of morality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, when I was in high school, I think when it started, was like 14, 15. I started looking for the perfect society, like a society where everybody has the freedom to develop themselves as far as they want to, but there was like an under level that you wouldn't go under. And I looked at all the political systems, communism, socialism, all the political parties, and uh, my method was that, like, I studied a bit their philosophy, and then I looked not at reality, but just, okay, what if you just implement this just like they want to? And every time when I did that, me as a 14, 15, 16-year old, I could find flaws in the system, basically. Like for communism, I didn't think it was fair, or for a cleaner to earn the same as a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody who is much harder gets paid the same as somebody who doesn't work hard. So I always could find flaws, and I was like, okay, I'm not a wonderkind child. I'm just quite young still. If I in my situation can already see the flaws, it probably won't be that good. It is not
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an Afghan classmate when I was 16, um, and he wasn't from a really practicing family, and he started practicing on his own. So I saw him change, and I remember we went to Belgium, Antwerp, with school, and I'm really interested in architecture and those kind of stuff. So there was a really big cathedral in Antwerp, and I really wanted to go in.
Is that in
And
Belgium?
yeah, in Belgium.
Okay.
So I really wanted to go in the cathedral, but he didn't want to go in, so I really had to force him in. So I finally got him in. We even had to pay, so he was really annoyed. And we were walking throughout the cathedral, and he said, "What are all those names on the floor?" And I said, "Oh, those are graves."
Yeah.
And he jumped up, and he was so shocked. And he was like, "What? You guys just walk over graves?" And he the whole route throughout the church, he jumped over
Yeah.
like it was a playground. And it was so funny, but also he triggered me with, and then we started discussing like morality in Islam and the perfect society, because when he said it's kind of strange that you just walk over the graves of people, I was like, yeah, now you say it is kind of strange, you know. um, and then the journey started of looking for the ideal society, and in this case looking into Islam. And it really wasn't, there wasn't any spirituality, any God. I didn't even perceive Islam as a religion. It was more like a political system, a self-help book of sorts.
Mhm.
um, and the more and more I looked into it, uh, I couldn't find any flaws, even in the things that I really didn't like, because I was a bit of a, I was a bodybuilder, so I looked really good, so it was really easy to to get with girls. So I wasn't like, no premarital relationships, wasn't like,
Right.
oh
Right.
yes, I really want that, So it
Yeah.
wasn't even the things that weren't really tempting, or I would personally like to do. I saw the wisdom behind it, and I couldn't
Right.
find any flaws. So I was 18 that came at a stage that I can still remember, that I said to my mom is, um, it doesn't matter if you believe in God or spiritual, but if you just follow the things that is in the Quran, it's impossible for you not to become a good functioning, successful human being.
Mhm.
And I then came at a point that I was basically like, okay, this isn't a self-help book. It's 1400 years old. It was written by a man, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who couldn't read or write, in a society which there wasn't like a lot of culture or academics. Like, you had the Persian Empire and the Greek Empire, but Mecca was quite secluded from that. It somehow I was like, okay, it's really, really hard to believe that an illiterate guy in the desert came up with this all on his own.
Mm.
And then the step to um, accepting that it was from a higher being
Mhm.
became like basically the logical step, like a scientific explanation for the strange perfect system that I just found out about.
I see. So, like for you, it's interesting. So, first of all, I want to comment that people who are critical of Islam in the West, a lot of times they will say Islam's not a religion. It's not about connecting to God. It's a political ideology. It's a system, right? And it's
Yeah,
interesting that you took it from the positive. Like you looked at Islam originally as not like a God, as not a God-centered ideology. It seems like more like a political system, a way of life, but without the God. Like this is
yeah, it was just about the rules.
if I
Yeah,
do these things, that it will make me a better. If I implement the rules that Islam governs by, and if society would implement the rules that Islam governs by, that I as a human being, and society as a whole, would become much better functioning. We'd be much better off, right?
yeah.
Did you ever like what were your when you started researching the systems? What kind of material were you consuming to like come to these conclusions that this is like what made you see that this is the system? What kind of books were you reading? Were there articles, lectures? What kind of material were you consuming?
There was a lot of conversation with
Okay.
the one Afghan guy.
Uh-huh.
That really started it off. And I think in a later process, um, it's quite a while back now, so it's kind of hard to remember.
Right.
I know it was a lot of internet, not really lectures, but articles and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And
Yeah.
didn't really read a lot of books. I did read the Quran. Um, I found it very funny to see, because basically, if it's quite funny that if you know the Bible, the Quran makes a lot more sense if you read it.
Yeah.
So because it refers a lot to biblical happenings. So that was quite. I really found that interesting. Um, but there was a lot of conversation with him and some internet articles basically.
Okay. Did you ever like some people like are really hesitant to like give somebody who's not a Muslim the Quran, because the Quran, when you read it, doesn't read chronologically, right? It's something that's kind
Yeah,
of a little all over the place. Did you have a
yeah,
problem when
true.
you were reading the Quran? Did you seem like this is kind of like jumbled, or did it like come together? Like even a Christian reads it. The Christian sometimes will be like, it's something weird. It's like not, they're used to everything being chronological, and then the Quran jumps
Yeah,
back and forth.
in first view, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
Basically, yeah,
Mhm.
it's true. So even so, now I would not advise for somebody who's researching our religion to start off with a translation of the Quran.
Okay.
Indeed, because it is difficult. It is difficult to read. It's difficult to understand, and I think if you know the biblical stories, it's quite entertaining to see the references. At least that was what motivated me to continue reading, because I found it funny, and because I was in a Christian primary school, so we read through the Bible, and when I graduated, well, I didn't graduate from primary school, but when I get off primary school, they gave me a Bible and I read it. So I found that interesting to see those links. So that motivated me to read a lot into it. But I agree that it isn't the most, it's not like step one if
Mm.
you want to really understand Islam.
I think that's hard to explain to people sometimes, because we say that the Quran, if the because people will say, well, if it's the word of God, it should need a preamble, it should need a precursor. You should be able to dive right in, and I almost feel like it's your mindset going in, right? If
Yeah,
you are gonna be looking to critique from the get go, then you will find issues, right? You will find
yeah,
things, but I think that's like that with everybody, right? Honestly, because if I'm going to be perfectly fair, when I'm reading the Gospels in a New Testament, I'm looking at it from a critical eye. I'm not looking at it from a Christian point of view.
yeah,
You understand what
true.
I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
And I think it's really hard for people sometimes to to really look at it object. So when the first time I read the Quran when I was 19, the English translation, and
yeah,
um, I wouldn't say I was looking at it critically. I would say I was open. I was kind of like, I was bored, actually. That's what I was. But I come from a Muslim family, so I wasn't questioning Islam. I was just like, I need some. I was bored that night, and there was no party in the dorm, right?
yeah,
So it was on my bookshelf. My dad made sure I had a copy of it when he dropped me off to the university, and so I basically like pulled it off my shelf and started reading it, and I liked it, and I never had an issue with I never had an issue with the whatchamacallit, the whole thing of how it was kind of seemed jumbled, etc., etc. Only later that I hear people critique it on that level. You understand what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah. I think it's just, of course I didn't have any issue with it when I read it, but I think the problem with it is that it's not Islam 101. You don't see
Yeah.
the basics straight away, and um, if you really want to do dawah with somebody, you really want to grasp what Islam is about. Yeah, it's really hard to first have to read an entire book
Right.
and then have to connect all the dots. So I know that people find it difficult to hear or say, because it might feel like deviant or something, that you don't
Hmm.
appreciate the word of God. But
Right.
only, I know that the more I study Islam, the more I know, the more I appreciate reading the Quran, because all of a sudden you know what is what it's about. So I think if you talk from a Dawa standpoint, although I was really touched, the Quran did play a role in my conversion, because it it did spiritually connect with me at some point.
Hmm.
So not only from a rational but also from a spiritual point. But yeah, after I became Muslim, and I really got to Islam 101, the spiritual development went much quicker.
The interesting thing about the Quran that I think makes it unique is that it seems the book is talking to you, because
Yeah,
it asks these kind of rhetorical questions, right? In its style, whereas like the Bible, I don't see that necessarily. It's like more like the Gospels, for example, was like a narration of Jesus's life, right? As
yeah,
supposedly told to his disciples. You got the book of Revelation is like the story of the end of time, and there's parts of the Quran that are like that. But how often in the Quran is it almost like calling? It's almost like calling you out. It's calling the
yeah,
reader out in a way, which is like interesting. And I think that's why a lot of converts, when they read the Quran as like the first, because you look at like Abdul Rahim Green or you look at Jeffrey Lang and these other converts to Islam, many of them when they read the Quran is their first exposure, right? And back when they converted, there was no sophisticated, there's Ahmed
yeah,
Didat, there was no Ayera. Um, they were just like that's the natural book. Even as a Muslim who wasn't practicing like 20 years ago, that's kind of the first thing I was like, well, this is where you start. And I didn't know much about Hadith or Sunnah or other books. And the logic is quite simple. It's like, listen, I should be able, like, to be honest, if I were to want to read about if I wanted to study communism, the first book I would read is probably Marx's, like, what's
yeah,
his, and I think that's a natural react. Now, sometimes you might need to read a primer or like a commentary to understand the context
yeah,
behind it, right? Otherwise, when you're reading it, even the Bible itself, I think the Bible needs some context and commentary to understand what you're actually reading, right? Because
yeah,
if you were if you knew nothing about Christianity and started picking up the Bible and started reading, I think you might also have similar issues. Like, okay, well, yeah, there's this book, but and at the end of the day, a Christian will argue like, well, if you're reading it openly, the Holy Spirit will grab you, and then it'll enter you. That's how kind of
yeah,
not every Christian says it that way, but like that's kind of terminology, and that's the kind of terminology they'll use. But anyways, so it seems to me like your conversion to Islam is very practical in that sense, and you didn't get much pushback from your family, I take it.
well, the alhamdulillah, it was really easy for me because um, when I actually converted, I just moved to my dorms to a student flat,
Okay.
like 3 4 months before that. So I started university, switched over to living on my own. So basically, the most intense, acute part of my conversion, and I'm thinking about really becoming Muslim, was basically done in seclusion in a new environment. So that made it really easy for me. So I've, and I did have, and I even kept it like to myself when I converted. I didn't go straight to my parents to tell about it.
Mm-hmm.
I told my mom quite quickly. It took me longer from my dad to be before I told my dad, because I felt like, because he has more an academic background, I had to have more answers
Mm-hmm.
if when I came out basically as a Muslim.
Right.
Um, but it was quite hard because it was in the middle of the Syria revolution, and then all the guys going there, especially the young people, the converts. So I think the biggest part why there was a lot of, not pushback, but fear and basically, yeah, panic, is because they were scared that I would radicalize.
Let me ask you this: like, so you convert to this religion that has all these rules now, right before you go to college, university. Is university or college the same way as in America, where it's pretty much like, um, you ever seen like Animal House? I think that's what it is, or like these college like National Lampoons, Van Wilder. Have you seen these
No, no.
movies like where basically so college is the big 4-year party,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Is it
yeah,
like
yeah.
that in the Netherlands as well? That when you go to university, it's like 4 years of just like partying and girls and like drinking and drugs. Is that how it is?
Um, yeah, the only thing what I know of is the American movies, so I don't know if
Yeah,
it's that bad in reality. But
it can
yeah,
be.
of course. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we have like the fraternity. We have it a bit. It's not so. It's not like the American movies, but yeah, of course, man. You're young, especially when you live in a dormitory or in a student flat. Yeah, of course, there's partying all the stuff. Yeah.
So how hard was it to scope that? Because you had this. So I'll be honest with you, man. Like a lot of my friends that I grew up with who were Muslim growing up, or who like I went to like we call Sunday school with when we were kids. College is what derailed them. College is what took them off the path. Because when they
Yeah.
got to college, you know, they were. I remember this kid. He was I went to this high school like graduation ceremony like 20 years ago, like, you know, and this kid was giving a talk about how like as we leave high school and we have to like stay true to our Islamic roots and stuff. And within a year, he was like the first one to have a girlfriend. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like he was, and you know, everything you could think of was going down. You know what I'm saying? It was just the college is the environment is like because you're almost by yourself. So even if you're
Yeah.
already Muslim, and you grew up like 20 years as a Muslim or 18 years as a Muslim, like many of us, you're still struggling. So I can't imagine how it would be to be like someone like yourself, and you're naturally like physically more gifted than us. You're not short and brown. You're you know, and you're in the body and you're in the fitness space, right? You're
Yeah.
pretty much like walking eye candy. And what do you? And then you got this religion that has like, oh, you can't do this stuff, especially with the opposite gender, especially, you know.
Yeah.
But how did you deal with that? Eh.
Yeah. It was. It was.
It's probably a process.
Make sure my wife doesn't watch this back. um, yes, you know, I think the easy part is that when you convert, um, your iman is you're so enthusiastic. You're so, yeah, it was hard, but um, it didn't really took me because I was rationally so convinced. No, no,
Yeah.
basically at the convert high, and I think everybody knows it when they, or even born Muslims when they find the Deen. Basically, you get such a motivation boost, and because I lived in my environment was totally new,
Mhm.
straight away because I was only like I lived on myself for 4 months, so my whole social network, my friends, everything was new. So I immediately had the opportunity to form my environment with a friend group and such that fitted my Muslim identity. So yeah, it was quite hard because I was a little bit of a player type of guy.
Yeah.
So that was quite hard to all of a sudden going from a lot to nothing.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's a process, right? It's a process, and I think that's what people
yeah,
need to understand. Like you're like the expectation isn't that like, and it seems to me like the only human being that was like instrumental in your like learning about Islam was your Afghan friend from high school, right?
yeah,
There wasn't like a big community. It wasn't like lectures. It was just like, you know, he was kind of your trigger point, and then you had your supplemental material on the internet, and everything just kind of like fell into place. You know what I mean? It didn't.
yeah. But I must say that after I converted, I automatically got into a friend group with a lot of practicing brothers. So
Okay.
um, I'm a bad example of how a
Mm.
convert
Yeah.
finds his Islamic identity because Allah really made it so easy for me
Yeah.
because I went from um, having like no friends in a new environment to having like a full Muslim functioning social life. So um, I never use my own experiences. For example, when I help other converts or when I give advice to other converts, because I've had done some like coaching for new Muslims
Uh-huh.
throughout our mosque and some dawah organizations here, and um, bro, I really had it easy. I I had a lot. I had to give up a lot
Yeah.
because yeah, like you told me, I was a lot more muscular at that time, and so it was quite easy to get what I wanted. Um, but it was so easy for me because I could just leave the whole scene. I could keep myself away from fitna and such. So it was that made it really easy.
Right,
So
right.
I'm not a good example of
Yeah.
a regular convert, so to say.
I would argue that everyone's story is unique in that sense, but like your story is very interesting in a sense that like very rare. I don't think this the first. It's the first time I've probably heard of someone who like was interested in the rules and the regulations and the system, and then found the divine part, the spiritual side of it after. Right.
Yeah,
Most times, people are looking for. They feel a spiritual void. They feel like I'm not getting what I want. I feel empty inside, etc. I'm depressed. They went through some bad experience, a low point in life. That has them to start searching, right?
yeah.
Uh, by the way, what is that sound going off? You know what? It's my WhatsApp. That's what it was. It's my WhatsApp. I was like, what is that loud, annoying? Okay. So, anyways, so that's yeah. I mean, like, I wouldn't discredit. Like, I think everyone's scenario is unique. I think everyone's, you know, it's very fortunate that your parents were like more or less on board, right? You know, not everyone's parents are going to be that accommodating. Um, was there like a Muslim society, a student society at the university you went to? Is that where you found your circle?
No, we didn't have it at the time.
Okay.
No, it was just basically like I had the one African friend,
Yeah.
um, and he had a dinner party with his friend group, all practicing brothers, and he invited me. And it's always funny, like if with the friend group we still are in contact. When we look back at it, they always said like, you know, you always have like you have like a guy who's interested in Islam, and you invite him
Yeah.
deliberately to do dawah and such.
Yeah.
There was no intention to do dawah. It was just like, oh, yeah, I have a Dutch friend who's coming to eat with us. And they didn't knew I was already so well read in and into Islam.
Okay.
So basically, it was that friend group when I converted that I automatically took part in.
Mm-hmm.
And we really clicked because we are still friends, alhamdulillah. So yeah, I basically went from knowing one guy and after converting automatically getting into his friend group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they all went to the same school, so that made it really easy.
So, like, can you talk about how they interacted with you because they didn't know who you were, and you're saying it
Yeah,
wasn't from a point of view of dawah. I think often we Muslims have a tendency whenever there's someone brought in who's not Muslim, um, to our space, we're automatically thinking like the alarm bell will go off like, all right, how do we get? And everyone's like, oh, that's mine. I need to give him dawah. That's my conversion.
yeah, yeah.
Like how do they interact with you? That like what was their outlook? Let's say did they just treat you like a normal dude? Is that what it was?
Um, yeah, basically, it was a long time ago, so it's quite hard for me to remember exactly. But we have spoken about it. What they said and what I also saw is that they were basically shocked with how much I already knew about Islam and how
Mm-hmm.
much, basically, how I was at that moment I was convinced about the whole wisdom about, around Sharia, and so I was convinced about the rules. There was no doubt
Yeah.
that all the rules of Islam were correct. So when we started talking, and they said, I don't know how, but we of course we came on the topic of religion, and
Mm-hmm.
the one guy started talking. I was like, yeah, I agree, and they were like, what? Say what? And basically then. I remember that we were talking and we were going more. The topic of conversion came, and I remember that I asked, I want to become Muslim, and that they were like, they were kind of shocked. They didn't see it coming. So basically, I was just at the moment of the dinner, although they didn't plan it, or it wasn't like, yeah, it wasn't like a strategic invite. I was like on the verge of converting, and this was just the last push, and they
Mm-hmm.
were quite surprised by it also.
I got you. You know what? When I put it on YouTube, I need to like name this title: European bodybuilder convinced by Sharia. It's like clickbait title. You always see these like in the Dow webs, like Gain Peace or somebody, or
Yeah.
brother Eddie on the Dean Show has his YouTube videos up. But
You should
anyways,
have you should interviewed me like 5 years ago when I was still big, so it was a little more convincing.
maybe just send me an old picture, man. Just send me the picture.
Yeah.
Anyways, with that being said, I wanted to kind of get into the issue of fitness. as another worldview. So one thing on the channel we talk about is like, what do people believe in? Like, why do they believe it? How did you get into the fitness space, so to speak? Like,
Yeah.
how did that start with you? Is that something sometimes, oftentimes, our fathers are instrumental in getting us into sports, etc. Where did it start for you?
Well, my father really wasn't into sports. He was always had troubles with his back, so it wasn't from basically from my family. But my family always, I always had to do a sport. So I played football, I played basketball. When I was a child, our parents wanted us to at least do one sport. I did get the physical side of it just by upbringing, but the big my road into very harsh exercise basically came from, I don't know how it started, but I always from the beginning, when I was a really small child, I had an obsession with going into the army. I always wanted to become a soldier, and so literally from like when I was a small child, I had all the posters in my room. So um, my whole career plan, future plan was when I was going to turn 18, I would go into the army. So I had to be physically ready. I had to be strong, a good vascular health. So basically, that's how I started working out when I was 16. I was allowed to go to the gym. And basically, that's where it started. So it was a lot of training to work myself up to be fitted to do all the exams for joining the army. Um, and I even applied for the army. When I was 17 and a half. When you're 17 and a half, you can go apply for the Dutch army. And I even made it in. But just when I was made in, I had like my date that I had to go to the barracks. A few days they called off because it was the 2008 crisis, and all the new recruits, there was a big budget cuts in the army. So basically, everybody was kicked out again who wasn't already in a solid function. So I think that's a big part of how I came into bodybuilding, because my entire life I lived to this ideal of being a disciplined, physical, healthy soldier, and it was my whole identity. And especially when I made it in, I was like, okay, life goal achieved, you know. So all of a sudden, I got what I wanted all my life, and all of a sudden that was gone, and I didn't know what to do in my life. And also I was doing I was already went to study economics before I went to the army, but this was really annoying that the start of the army training was in the middle of the school year.
Okay.
So initially I didn't want to go to university, but I was like, okay, I'm going to leave in 6 months anyway. But my parents like forced me, and I think they low-key wanted me to just continue my studies when I was in. But so I quit my studies. So I was in the middle of the school year with no education, no study program, no work. So there was a big void. And I think I basically replace that identity crisis with bodybuilding, because if you look at it, bodybuilding has a lot alike with the regime of being a soldier. Really strict training regime, a lot of strict nutrition, and basically the bodybuilding world has a real, the tough guy grind. It really has the warrior mentality in it, the hardcore bodybuilding part, So it really spoke to me. It was like a substitute for being a soldier. And I think that's looking back, I think that's the big part why it spoke too much to me so much, because it was a replacement of what I wanted all my life.
The interesting thing about your disposition in general, you're talking about when you're 7 or 8 years old, talking about being in the wanting to join the army because of discipline. I'm hearing a lot the theme, even the whole conversion to Islam thing. It's about systems and discipline. It's about like finding the system that's ideal for the human being, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, the army. What's the I'll you don't know this about me. I actually was the army culture, the military culture, is something that America looks like very highly upon, right? Like anytime
Yeah,
there's a veteran, if there's like if there's anyone you're in a room, if you're wearing any army insignia or something, people always say thank you for your service. Um, I actually wanted to join the Marine Corps, like about 20 years ago, because two of my friends joined, and I had a recruiter come to my house, and my dad. But my interest was really, I was interested in the issue, because I still am. But I see, one thing about me that you need to understand is that, like, and I think a lot of people like this. People always respect discipline. People always like the idea of being disciplined, but
yeah,
but liking it and respecting it and doing it is a huge gap, right? Um, and it seems to me like would you say you conditioned yourself? Because when you're 7 or 8, thinking about discipline, when I was that age, I wasn't thinking about that kind of stuff. Most people aren't, right? Um, so like, was it easy? When you were a kid, were you a kid that like tried to always eat healthy, like research what food was good and what kind of stuff? Is that how you operated when you were younger, like a teenager or something?
yeah. Not so much the nutrition, but uh, I really valued the grind aspect of going physical hurt and
Mm,
bearing physical difficulty. That was really something that I was really into. Like a good example is that um, my high school was 10 kilometers away from my house.
okay.
I don't know how many measurements of freedom that is, but
That's about six
um,
miles. 6 miles. It's not bad. 6 miles. Okay.
yeah. So we also always had to cycle on our bikes to our school in the rain, and the Dutch winters are quite bad. A lot of wind, especially in the rural. It was we were riding to. I don't know if there's an English word for it. Polder. Basically, the Dutch country is as flat as a pancake. So where we rode through, it was all farmland, so no trees. So we were totally exposed to the environment, to all the wind and the rain and the snow. And I remember that it was like a 30 minutes ride on our bikes. And I remember that, um, especially in the winters when there was rain and you were cold, you were wet, all your clothes were just soaking wet. I deep down enjoyed it because I was thinking, okay, this is preparing me for the army,
Mm,
because I know from the army, for the movies, that you see the guys living in very bad conditions in the rain, in the cold, in the snow.
yeah.
So everything what I did and what was physically really taxing, I like visualized. Okay, this is going to prepare me for what I want in my future.
It's this whole idea of embracing what's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's my personal challenge. Like me, I always gravitate. My default is like I want to do what's comfortable, and
yeah.
I think that's the problem with a lot of people is like, you don't want to like David Goggins. If you read this book he has called "Can't Hurt Me," have you heard of David Goggins?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. The ex was he Marine or Navy SEALs?
Navy SEAL, right. He has this book
Yeah,
called. I would recommend it. It's a good book to read, or audio book to listen to. I listen to audiobook. Can't hurt me, but it's this entire thing about like becoming hard, right? But it's like
yeah,
you become hard by like embracing, like falling in love with the process of being uncomfortable and like pain. Like you actually are seeking out the pain. You
yeah,
understand?
yeah,
Um, that is something that's really interesting because it seems like it takes like there's got to be like it seems like you as at a young age had some innate like desire or purpose to achieve something that you would embrace pain and discomfort, right?
yeah,
um I think just understanding it's very unique for a child at 7 or 8 years old, or even as a teenager, to understand that. Looking back, I always think about like, man, what if I did and that's the problem I have, is like I have a lot of what ifs, like what if I
yeah,
did
yeah,
this? And not that Muslims, we shouldn't have that kind of mindset, because it's like what happened has happened, right? Let's move forward with what we can control today, and move on tomorrow. What happened is in the past. But that's kind of like, interesting to understand a disposition. So, you know,
What I want to highlight though is that I think that the whole discipline part was really on a physical level, and that's what I, especially now with coaching, and I talk a lot about motivation, is that I had like an intrinsic motivation for physical hardship because I thought it was going to prepare me for what I really wanted in life. But I want to highlight that this discipline on the physical part was really um, focused on this physical part, because if you now would say that I'm a super disciplined guy and my wife watches this back, I think she's going to laugh because um, uh, and I think that's really important for people to understand that discipline is not like a characteristic. It's really um, it's a motivation for certain things, and when you're internally motivated, it is really easy for me. So for example, I always know that I love exercising, and a friend once asked me, like, when I prefer to work out in the morning, he said, like, Maarten, how can I be so disciplined that I can also work out in the morning? And I was like, me working out doesn't take discipline. It takes discipline for me to not go work out and, for example, study for an exam, because I never reached any high level of competitive bodybuilding. Um, but I basically threw away my first study. I studied physical therapy. I just threw it away for my sport, even when I was not on a significant high level. So um, it's important to know that it didn't took me any motivation, um, even still, to exercise. It's hard for me to not exercise when is not smart for me to exercise. So I think the idea of I wanted to be disciplined sounds really nice, but I think it was more about motivation, because this discipline didn't necessarily carry over to other aspects in my life, and I still really struggle with being disciplined, for example, with other stuff that I don't like. So I think it's really a matter of motivation, not so much of discipline. I'm not really keen on the whole idea of discipline. I think it's pretty oversold.
So it's actually like, so
And that's also why I don't. I
go ahead.
I'm actually pretty annoyed by, like, especially in America, the whole soldier culture is so glorified, and we don't really have it in the Netherlands, but we have a lot with professional athletes, and I find this glorification of these kind of individuals that are able to put out a lot of effort and put up with a lot of hardship. I don't think it's really applicable to other people, because it's all about motivation. Everybody in the army, especially on the high levels of the army, special forces, they have like a really intense internal motivation to do this. It's not much about doing the things they don't want. Basically, they want it. Of course, it's not. They don't enjoy the pain, but still, I have some like sadistic. I still enjoy the feeling of physical pain. Like when I cycle, like a few weeks ago, I was cycling like 70 kilometers, and it was raining, and low key, I was really enjoying it because it was so uncomfortable, because it took me back to the things I like. So I would find it uncomfortable to classify myself as being really disciplined. It was just something I really enjoyed. Or I did it because I wanted to achieve something that I would really enjoy.
Okay, so do you think it's? I'm trying to grasp. I kind of get the overall thing. You gave some good examples, so I understand. People who like are regular going to the gym, they have a routine. Like when you take that gym away from them, the routine away from them, they get uncomfortable. That's when they
Yeah.
become. It's not. It doesn't take discipline for them to go to the gym. It's become a habit, right? Like it's a
It's
natural
the same.
habit.
Like, does it take you any discipline to watch Netflix?
No.
It's literally the same for me with exercise.
Okay.
I enjoy a good workout session in the gym as much as watching Netflix. I enjoy the training even more. So I find it, and that's the problem when we, especially now with Instagram and social media, we glorify physical healthy individuals, and then the more steroids you take, the better, because they look even more awesome. And um, those people are not the ones that should teach people how to start living healthy, because they don't do it because they want to be healthy. They do it because they enjoy it. There's nothing more to it, basically. I
Yeah.
never we like to tell ourselves that we do it because it's healthy, but it's even like I did competitive bodybuilding. Competitive bodybuilding is not healthy. You don't die from it, but it's not beneficial for your health to go to single digits body fat levels. It's
Hmm.
just because I really enjoyed it. And somehow in this society, we have created the pinnacle of health, the poster boy of health, somehow is all of a sudden the fitness model. Even when he's in the shredded state, when he takes his pictures, he's basically on this weakest state that he's ever in. So I always, that's something with Muslim Fit that I really want to bring over, is that I want to reframe uh, our vision of health and
Hmm.
exercise, and stop glorifying stuff that isn't real, because it's not. I don't find pride in myself that I exercise 5 times a week.
Mm.
I would be really proud of myself when I would skip a session to do some stuff in my business that I don't want to do. You know. So
That makes sense. Yeah. So it definitely, well, I can relate to like when you get into routine, like I can understand the idea of enjoying the workout, but what about the other side of it, like the nutrition side? Because I think that's where a lot of people fall off, is that they might enjoy going to the gym and like lift, because they're, especially for guys, I think there's this innate like when you're lifting barbells or throwing
yeah,
around like weights, there's like this inherent like nature that you like unleash, right? It feels good like when you're doing it,
yeah.
you enjoy it. So but what about diet? Because for example, like I love junk food. Like if I want fried chicken and ice cream, how does that now that has to what's your mindset or approach with food and nutrition, especially when I assume you still have a pretty good metabolism, right, at your age?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's also what's really nice is that I'm really tall, so my basal metabolism rate is quite high. I
Uh-huh.
use more calories in rest than somebody who's really small, for example.
Right.
So all you Asians can use that as an excuse why you're overweight. But basically, yeah, I think that when we look at motivation, there's a whole science about this. Is you have the internal motivation, and I think what you now are getting into is the internalization and identification of certain lifestyle habits. Like at the moment, eating healthy is normal for me. It doesn't, yeah. It's the same. Like I always tell people, like Dutch people are, we always take our sandwich, just bread with cheese to work. And I say, does it take you any difficulty to eat your sandwich? It's the same for me with eating uh, rice with chicken, you know. So because it's so normalized for me. So it started off when I was competing and when I wanted to become a bodybuilder. It was really, it was difficult because it was a change, and I really did it because I really, really wanted to achieve this physique. At the moment, I'm not so. I don't really. I don't want to be as big anymore. Um, but because I've done this diet for so long, it's just my normal. It's something. It's who I am. So it doesn't.
Mhm.
I think that's a big part of motivation. Is you need some good reason to change. But
Right.
if you just keep it down long enough, it becomes your new normal.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense. So it's almost like when you have coach, like would you say your methodology for coaching is like to try to find the why? Why do you want to be healthy? Right?
yeah,
Set a goal, and then the habits that you build by setting that goal will eventually become your new normal, and that'll become easy for you, right? But what about like, do you get like cravings for food? Like what do you enjoy junk food at all, or is that something that you don't actually enjoy?
bro, I junk so much.
Yeah.
My wife always said that I'm a hypocrite because I always tell people they should live healthy, and I eat so much junk.
Right.
I have a difficulty with chocolate and ice cream. I
Same.
could easily eat a box of chocolate of ice cream every day, and it's really difficult for me not to. So, but you know, the good thing is that um, when I always say that when 90% of your diet and lifestyle is like on a really high level, health wise,
Mhm.
the 10% doesn't really matter, and it doesn't basically.
Yeah.
If you eat one chocolate bar every day, but the rest of your diet is like perfect, it doesn't matter. Somehow it kind of made an excuse for myself to eat too much junk. So actually, the funny thing is, actually right now I'm deliberately cutting back on junk food because it was getting out of hand a bit. I wasn't getting fat because I exercise so much, and especially now because I did when I wanted to go to the army, I did a lot of endurance training.
Yeah.
But endurance training is not. It has an interference effect with muscular development. So when I didn't go to the army anymore and I went into bodybuilding, I basically left all endurance training. And now, like recently, like 2 years ago, I started up road cycling again. It's really big in the Netherlands. So now, especially now when I exercise so much, um, I could get away with a lot of junk food. So I really like ice cream and pizza. So I'm now at the moment, basically, that's the first time in my life that I'm actually um, making dietary decisions based for my health, not so much for because before it was only based on my physical performance. I
Mhm.
ate just to fuel my sport, and it was I never cared about health. If there was something I could do to improve my results that was unhealthy, I would do it. That's also I'm really happy that I
Yeah.
converted before
Yeah.
I get older to use all the steroids and stuff because
Yeah.
I'm sure I would go that route.
I was gonna
I'm
say,
sure.
some people would disagree with your approach that like, okay, if you have one chocolate bar a day, because I think sometimes junk food is a catalyst for other junk food. Like you eat like so. I'll give you an example, right? If you eat like a really like junk meal, let's say I have burgers and fries, right? A cheeseburger and
Yeah.
fries, or something like, or you sometimes the food you eat, it seems to trigger a reaction. So like I want like a heavy carb meal, like bunch like probably my favorite food to eat, to be honest, is like a shawarma plate, like rice and shawarma and like garlic
Yeah.
sauce and tahini sauce. You know what I'm saying? That kind of
The
like
Turkish one or more
more
Arab?
more Arab, the more Arab
Yeah.
one, like you know what I'm saying, like the yellow rice with the pine nuts and like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
shawarma and some garlic sauce that hits the spot like every time. Like I could probably, and it's probably not that bad for you, to be honest, compared to like, if nothing's deep fried. It's like although the shawarma is like fatty cut, it's like fattier meat, right?
Yeah.
Um, but then after that, you have a craving to have ice cream, so you compound it, right? Sometimes it happen. That's what I've noticed sometimes, is that like certain foods trigger other junk foods immediately. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but the funny thing is, there has been a lot of study on this subject, and a lot of food cravings is more learned behavior than actual physiological triggers. And
Okay.
we like to, you see so many people talk about the addictive effects of sugar. Sugar isn't addictive, just a fact.
Okay.
um, but it's psychologically rewarding. So it's nice, and then if it's your habit to eat a dessert after every dinner, especially after like when you're going out to eat, and you learn yourself that when you go to a restaurant you take dessert, it's just a psychological trigger for you to start craving those foods. And there's so many. It's a really interesting study subject. Like a good example is they had one study where they have a meal replacement shake,
Yeah.
a protein shake. There was one group who got a shake which was labeled with a high calorie meal replacement shake, and the other shake was a low calorie replacement shake. They took subjective measures, so how full they were after the shake, and how fast they got hungry again. But they even took blood samples to look for some hormones and neurotransmitters that single hunger feelings.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that the people had the high calorie shake had less hunger and more satiety, and vice versa for the low calorie, and the difference for the low calorie group. And the funny, and even on a physiological level, you could see that the people at a high calorie replacement meal, had less hunger signaling. The funny thing is, it was the same shake with the same caloric value. So you see how much your unconscious, your conscious and unconscious psychology plays a role in your hunger signaling. And even you only get really physiological hunger signalings after a really big caloric deficit or a prolonged caloric deficit. So I think that if you crave more junk food after junk meal, it's more learned behavior. So basically, it's
Correct.
more your nafs than your physical body. But of course, the idea that it's not you, but it's your biology that is out of your control. It's much more uh, attractive to believe.
Yeah. So like, let's say in Ramadan, here's what happens in Ramadan, right? To a lot of us, myself included, right? You're fasting like 15 and a half hours, right? And then you feel like, oh, I want to eat something good at iftar. You
Yeah,
don't want to eat. And it's interesting. The other day when we were setting up this podcast, the other day, you were telling me that like, the thing of it is what was it? You're. I was like, I want to make sure I give you enough time to prepare for iftar, and you were like, all I got to do is microwave my Tupperware.
yeah.
And so like how do you like, so in Ramadan do you feel, because you just mentioned caloric deficit could trigger certain things in Ramadan, do you feel like you're still able to stay on, because I see these people that have like Rehan Jalali, for example, has these like routines right in Ramadan, and it sounds great on paper, but then when you actually like are feeling, because in Ramadan it's like, all right, by the time it's time to actually break your fast, you're starving. You want like pizza or like rice and chicken, or like,
Yeah,
but not like healthy rice and chicken. Like, I mean like seasoned like white rice, yellow rice with like garlic chicken or something, right?
yeah,
And a lot, or kebabs or something, right? That's kind of what you gravitate towards. And everyone's like, now it's like you gotta have your coffee after, gotta have your coffee or dessert or whatever, and then like have you seen Rama, like how what is your experience as far as like your how your diet is affected in Ramadan, where you had this caloric deficit throughout the day?
yeah. Well, we also know that sleep loss and uh, sleep deprivation also works against you, that you crave more high caloric foods, so high fat, high sugar foods. So there is a physiological aspect, of course, because you are physically hungry during Ramadan. But even then, I think your learned behavior, basically your nafs, plays a much bigger role than physiological
Mm,
factors. So um, just like like I told you, like I don't come from a Muslim family, so I haven't been brought up with the whole iftar culture, you know. And we
yeah.
know that in Muslim cultures, the iftar is like our whole cuisine changes, and you see all the memes that all the women are in the kitchen all day. So again, it's culture, so it's really difficult that if you're brought up with something and it's normal for you, it's hard to change that. And for me, it was easier because I was already having a really decent nutritional lifestyle from my sport. Even when I quit competing in bodybuilding, I just kept up with the diet because it was easy and normal for me. And especially, oh, my first Ramadans, I was still really focused on my physique. So even then, I was really pounding away food, not for my nafs, but well, it was for my nafs, but not for the nafs for food, but for my desire to keep uphold my physique, because you need a lot of calories,
Yeah.
and that's difficult in a small frame. So again, what I told you, what it was like when I converted, is my normal Ramadan behavior is shaped by basically my culture. And my culture at the moment was bodybuilding. Um, but I think that learned behavior plays a big role in it, and so it's not strange that people
Yeah.
and of course I do notice even me I do notice that it's really tempting to indulge in candy and such. So I do have the more difficulty than normal to stay
Right.
off ice cream and such.
Yeah.
Um, but I always say the easy thing. I don't have children yet, but if you don't buy it, you cannot eat it. Especially now during Ramadan when iftar is so late and the stores are closed. So if you don't buy it, cannot even go to the stores to get any. So I think behavior change when I do like coaching with clients, it's really practical. First,
Mm-hmm.
indeed, look at why do you want stuff, but I'm not like a mindset guru because your environment plays a bigger role in your behavior than your internals. I actually believe.
Okay.
So if you're surrounded by candy and not only just your immediate surrounding, but your environment is also your culture, your upbringing. Like if your whole idea of iftar is like a big nice meal, that's something that's so ingrained in your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Like mine is with what I basically grew up in a bodybuilding culture. That my whole and the soldier culture, that the physical discomfort and loving the suck and those kinds of stuff. It just became part of my personality, and it doesn't take any. It's automatic, you know. So a lot of
Right.
behavior is automatic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of times people. So how often do you get clients that like before Ramadan they have terrible habits and they're like Ramadan's gonna fix it all. We're gonna do everything in Ramadan, right? They want to get
Yeah,
in shape. They want to eat healthy in Ramadan. But I'm like, listen, if you're eating pizza and burgers right before Ramadan, you're not gonna like all of a sudden be doing like chicken and broccoli, grilled chicken and
no,
broccoli. You know what I'm saying? Like because it's almost like you because now you're adding more. In fact, you're adding more issues on top of your fasting now. You're adding that on top of your normal behavior, which is eating junk, and you're trying to change two
yeah.
things. Would you say that's like very? Do you see that seems to be a common theme? I see that people like try to like they want to use Ramadan to change everything, and then
Yeah.
nothing changes.
And basically, a lot of people can because Ramadan is something really special.
Yeah,
And I can compare it like when I was preparing for the competition, I did things it was impossible for me to do outside of competition because
yeah,
why should I starve myself to such extremes without a goal? So Ramadan is a short period. It's a special period, culturally and spiritually. So I think it's easy for people in a very like basically comes back to my first example. Like, why was it so easy for me to convert? Because all of a sudden I was in a new environment.
mm-hmm.
Ramadan is also a new environment because we even see everybody who's off the deen all of a sudden starts praying, start fasting. Your whole family goes into a Ramadan mode. So it can actually be quite. It can be more easy to change your behavior because you're in a totally new environment.
Right,
Also, your normal nutritional habits also are away because those are basically focused on certain times of the day, and now all of a sudden you eat at the evening. So, but the problem is if it's the same like New Year's resolutions. Um, it, because Ramadan is so different, it doesn't give you the tools or the habits um, that work outside of Ramadan. So
mm-hmm.
that's just indeed it's really hard. Like you see, it's basically like New Year's resolutions. So you have one group who has a lot of resolutions that doesn't do anything, or just 1 or 2 days. You
Right,
also have a group who actually does it, who goes to the gym, but then after 2 or 3 months they fall back off again. So indeed, the dress. I'm not a fan of the drastic switch.
mm.
When I do with clients, it's really gradual
Yeah,
build-up period, and also really looking into like what really changed in my life is I went from my whole life when it was from sports perspective it was always the search for the optimal
yeah,
and now um, I'm much more realistic, especially when I started working with clients and not only with myself. um, it's much better to have a mediocre lifestyle but something you can uphold than have a really, really, really healthy vegan, green smoothie, health lifestyle, but just for 3 months. So
Yeah.
I prefer, like if you now eat junk food every day, it will be better for you to just eat junk food for three times a week.
Yeah.
And if you can uphold that for the rest of your life, you're much better off than trying for 2 months to quit junk food at all, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I got it, because a lot of times people we get we get this external inspiration. We'll read some David Goggins book or something and like try to cut it out cold
Yeah.
turkey, and then just like, man, fall flat on our face. All right, Martin. Well, any parting words? I know it's almost iftar time there, so I promised you I'd let you go before, so you can go microwave your
Yeah.
chicken and rice. And
Yeah.
any parting words for the folks here, or just
Um, yeah, what I really want to give people is basically two things.
yeah,
First, like we talked about, stop. Well, you can learn a lot about from professional athletes and Navy SEALs and such, but realize a lot of people like to glorify themselves and like I said, like I never did anything of my training for health benefits, but I always liked to say, yeah, it's really healthy, because it is. Some parts of it is healthy, but stop. It's not. It's not. Uh, it's somehow it's not admirable of a professional athlete to train a lot, because most of the times it's the thing that he really likes, or like I don't know, I was the that Bolt tennis player, I forgot his name. He read a book that he really hated
oh,
tennis, but he was forced by his parents.
Andre Agassi.
Yeah. So they either love it, or they have like some psychological trauma that they're somehow, and you see that a lot in the army, especially special forces. There was a very interesting podcast about it, that a lot of guys in special forces had like some troubles in their youth, that they have like a big drive to prove themselves. So
Right.
um, I really doubt if those ideals can be very applicable for other situations or normal people. And I don't say they're better; they're just different. You know, a professional athlete is not the same as a normal people as to who cannot hyper focus on one thing in their life. Because
Right.
a professional athlete can, you know, and we can't. So how applicable is that knowledge for us in real life, basically? So, and I might sound a bit pessimistic or easy or um, against optimal, but I want to give an anti-message, because we live in a society with Gary Vee and all the grind culture, that
Yeah.
everything has to be perfect and that everything in your life is controllable, and if you don't succeed, it's your own fault. That just isn't the case. It's theologically not true, because we know that Allah decides what we get and what we don't get, and empirically we can see that, for example, now corona crisis, nobody could see this coming, and if you just started your business 2 months before and now you're bankrupt, it was not your fault. And even maybe Tony Robbins wants to convince you that it was your fault, it isn't, you know. So it's not that you can learn a lot from types like Gary Vee
Yeah.
and professional athletes who promote the suck and the grind and those kind of stuff, but I think there has to come a more balanced, realistic, true counter message of, okay, working hard is really important, but um, your life is not as makeable or shapeable as modern society tries to make you believe it. And because, for example, what I told you about, a lot of people came to me in my bodybuilding days as personal trainer. I want to look like a bodybuilder. Well, if you want to look good, you basically have to have great genetics. And if you want to look like the guys in the magazine, you have to take steroids. And um, a lot of, like, for example, I don't have the greatest genetics. Like, I have guys on my bodybuilding team. I worked with professional bodybuilders, and I saw guys who went twice as fast as me, but we did the same. Or even I didn't. I have clients who I knew what they did. I knew how they trained. I knew how they eat because I made all their programs, and they progressed much quicker than me. Even when I knew I did much more work, much harder, much more disciplined, and just because I had like freaky genetics, So
Yeah.
um, the world isn't as fair as in the way that we can control all the outcomes. And if you start believing, and because the society tells us, this is the reason why so many people get depressed, get burnouts, and also they start looking for the optimal, even when they cannot achieve it or it's not practical in their life. So it's not only not true, but it's harmful for actual growth and actual progress. Because believing in fairy tales will only make you fail.
Right. Real quick, I forgot to ask you this. Does your wife eat pretty healthy, or is she kind of on her own program?
Alhamdulillah, since she quite recently, like the last years, have been really going hard. But
Okay.
we always lived a bit apart because I had my really strict diet that I
Yeah.
want to keep up.
Right.
And the first year in marriage, when you're still everything is nice, she even cooked for me. But after a while, said, "Okay, if you want to eat 3-4 warm meals a day, you can do it yourself." So
Right.
it was separated a bit,
Yeah.
but alhamdulillah, the last years she really got to it, mashallah.
So she'll cook healthy stuff, but like sometimes your extra stuff you got to be. And your wife is not Dutch, I don't believe, right? So you're
No,
not
no,
getting.
she's Arab. Yeah.
So you're probably getting the better flavor there, right? Yeah, I know you're always commenting. I think I took a picture of like like this morning for sahur. I had like eggs and beef bacon and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you're always like, that looks like someone a white person would eat.
Yeah, that's all I always say, especially to Muslims.
Yeah,
Like I said, when I converted, it's not a fair comparison.
yeah,
If you're skinny when you're white, it's really not much of a uh, accomplishment. When you only eat what our cuisine offers.
yeah.
If I was brought up with Lebanese cuisine, Afghan, or bro, I've been so fat, I would be Muslim fat instead of Muslim fit.
And then as we wrap up here, where can people learn more about you, the work you do, if they want to hire you as a coach? Do you take non-Muslim clients? Like Muslim Fit is a brand, but do you have non-Muslim
Yeah.
clients as well?
Yeah, I have no Muslim clients because I take
Yeah.
Muslim clients at the moment. I'm working on my non-Muslim my cafe website.
Okay.
I just recently registered because first I was
Cat
only
for fit.
registered.
Cat for fit.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the Dimi Fit.
Yeah. Dimmy fit. That's funny.
But no. Yeah, you can. I think if you really want to grasp what I do, the best thing is to look at on LinkedIn because I'm rebranding a bit. I want to move away from Muslim fitness. I want to go more into vitality coaching. So still physical health, but also a lot of important things, and also looking at why do you do things and morality and stuff. So if you really want to know what I really do, the best thing is to look at my LinkedIn because it's more representable of my real profession. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Just look up Muslim Fit. I type everything in English. There's also a French guy who has more likes than me. He stole my ID. But if you see a French speaking guy, it's not me. And you could go to my website, muslimfit.com.
All right. Well, on that note, this video is up on Facebook. It will stay on Facebook, and I will be posting it on YouTube. And the audio from this will be so this is one of the things we're doing with this channel here is like trying to create different kinds of medium. This is an actual podcast episode, I would call it. Full show that'll be up on the podcast apps hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so. Maybe the next show as soon as I figure out how to extract the audio and post it. And,
At least if you don't wait for like 6 months, like you did with the
yeah,
episode with Human and such.
yeah. Yeah, I know, right? Who knows what other kind of goodie? Well, do you see? I don't know if you saw this morning at like Fajr time. I have an old video of Dr. Shadi al-Masri from like 2 years ago on my phone.
Yes, man. Of your collab episode.
Yeah. So it was on my phone. It'd never been released, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna post it. It's not the cleanest audio, but it is what it is. It's fine. But yeah, you can follow if you're on follow this channel on Facebook. We're on YouTube now, Sultans of Sneakers, Instagram, TikTok. I will be getting more active on TikTok probably after Ramadan. I need
So
to
we can
think
see you
about
do the dances.
maybe I need to think about a creative strategy for TikTok. So if anyone has any like tips on TikTok, let me know. Get at me, hit me on the DM on Instagram or here on Twitter. And then probably after Ramadan, I'll probably ramp up TikTok production again. So for our special guest, Maarten van Elst, this is your host, Mahin Islam, signing off for Sultans and Sneakers. I will